Next, let's talk about springs. Springs are the places aquifer water flows to the surface. A pool and often a stream are formed by springs. Texas is home to more than 3,000 springs. Each one of these little purple dots is a spring on the map. Springs can be cool water or so hot the water steams and almost boils when it reaches the surface. Springs often form along faults. These are places where an earthquake has cracked and split open the earth, exposing the aquifer's water-bearing rock. One such fault in Texas is the Balcones Fault, which runs from approximately the southwest part of the state near Del Rio to the north-central region near Waco along Interstate 35. For a distance of about 300 miles, this fault has exposed the Edwards Aquifer, creating many prominent springs. And these springs have been extremely important in the history and development of the state of Texas. Springs have played a large role in the creation of our cities. Many of our cities, particularly in central Texas, were built near springs that provided water for Native Americans and early settlers. Salado was built around Salado Springs. That's the 12th largest spring in Texas, and Salado Springs is located near the Stagecoach Inn on the east side of Interstate 35. Many people have heard of Barton Springs. Austin, the Texas state capital, was built where it is today because of the consistent and abundant flow of water from Barton Springs. Now that's the 5th largest spring in the state. Today the springs are more commonly known as Barton Springs Pool, which is located in Zilker Park and is open for swimming year-round. San Marcos was built around the San Marcos Springs, the 2nd largest in Texas. These springs were home to Native Americans long before Europeans arrived and are thought to be the longest continually inhabited site in all of North America. For many years, the springs were the location of Aquarena, an amusement park featuring glass-bottom boat rides so visitors could view the underwater life. Today, the springs are part of the campus of Texas State University, where visitors can still take glass-bottom boat rides and learn about the aquatic ecosystems in the spring. New Braunfels was built at the largest of Texas springs, Comal Springs. These springs are also the largest in the United States west of the Mississippi River. They're located at Londa Park and form the headwaters of the Comal River. Just downstream of the park is Schlitterbahn, where hundreds of thousands of Texans enjoy the Comal's river waters each year. San Antonio was built around San Antonio and San Pedro Springs. San Antonio Springs flow out of the aquifer on the property of the Incarnate Word Sisters north of downtown San Antonio in a place called the Headwaters Sanctuary. The waters then flow through the Breckenridge Park into downstream San Antonio. San Pedro Springs emerge in San Pedro Park, the second oldest public park in the United States. Spanish missionaries located here in the early 1700s. San Antonio is also the largest city in North America wholly dependent on groundwater. As a result, the city's future depends on maintaining the sustainability of the Edwards Aquifer, which feeds these springs. Uvalde was built near the Leona River, which is fed by Leona Springs. This large group of springs now has very reduced flows. Fort Clark, now called Brackettville, was built around Los Morris Springs. These springs supplied the military fort with water from 1852 until just after World War II, but now the springs feed into a public swimming pool. Del Rio was built on Texas' 4th largest springs, the San Felipe Springs. These are a group of 10 or more springs that extend for over a mile along San Felipe Creek on the grounds of the San Felipe Country Club and several ranches to the north of Highway 90.